In the spring of 1865, Union forces finally breached the defenses of Richmond, Virginia, entering the burning capital of the Confederate Republic. 4 years of sustained military pressure had collapsed the city. Entire blocks were reduced to hollow shells, and abandoned weaponry littered the riverbanks. General Ulysses S. Grant arrived to take control of the conquered capital, but before he inspected any military installations or met with his top officers, he rode to a private house on Church Hill to visit a 47-year-old spinster. Richmond society knew Elizabeth Van Lew as Crazy Bet, an unstable woman who wandered the streets muttering to herself. Grant knew her differently. He had been receiving her encrypted intelligence for over a year, and later described her network as his most reliable source of information. Van Lew was wealthy, Northern educated, and vocally opposed to slavery. In 1861, expressing sympathy for the Union in the capital of a paranoid, slave-holding republic usually resulted in the confiscation of property, arrest, or the gallows. She had no formal training in espionage and no way to operate from the shadows. To survive, she realized she had to weaponize her enemies' own societal assumptions, turning their daily biases into a barrier that prevented them from even looking at her. Her operation started almost immediately after the war began. Her first target was Libby Prison, a massive converted warehouse that served as the Confederacy's primary facility for holding captured Union officers. Using her prominent family name, Van Lew secured permission to bring food, books, and supplies to the inmates. She presented the entire effort as an act of devout, harmless Christian philanthropy. Behind the baskets of bread, she was extracting tactical intelligence from prisoners about Confederate troop movements they had observed before capture. She also identified reliable men who could be broken out and smuggled northward through a chain of safe houses. Confederate officials approved her visits because their 19th-century worldview left them unable to perceive a wealthy, moralizing woman as a tactical threat. In their eyes, she was a charitable socialite, not a spy. As the war dragged on, Confederate counterintelligence grew paranoid. Operatives and other Union spirings were caught and executed. Van Lew herself was questioned multiple times, and officials even searched her mansion looking for evidence of treason. To deflect the scrutiny, she committed to a dangerous public performance. She leaned into the persona of Crazy Bet, dressing in mismatched clothing and behaving erratically whenever she was in public view. Wandering the streets while muttering to herself provided the perfect operational cover. It allowed her to conduct active surveillance of the city and pass physical messages under the protection of being considered too confused to be worth watching. Richmond society's tendency to simply ignore the mentally unstable provided an impenetrable shield. Because she was dismissed as eccentric, her intelligence gathering remained completely undetected. Her most audacious move was placing an operative directly inside the executive center of the Confederate government itself. She recruited Mary Jane Bowser, a black woman previously enslaved by the Van Lew family, who had been educated in Philadelphia and possessed a photographic memory. Bowser was inserted into the executive mansion posing as a hired servant. Bowser cleared dinner plates and swept floors, while Confederate President Jefferson Davis hosted highly classified briefings with his top generals. She retained every spoken word and mapped every document she saw on the tables. The men in that room were fighting a war to preserve white supremacy. Their certainty in that ideology meant they never suspected a black servant could understand their military planning, turning their worst prejudice into a catastrophic intelligence failure. These social illusions protected the network, but moving the raw data out of Richmond required cold, physical logistics. This circular brass cipher disk was used to mathematically scramble military reports. It ensured that even if a courier was intercepted, Confederate guards would find nothing but an unreadable string of letters. Couriers walked right past armed Confederate checkpoints, smuggling these tightly rolled reports hidden inside the hollow soles of their shoes. The physical tradecraft worked for 4 years because the best codes are those the enemy doesn't know to look for. Soldiers never suspected the seemingly harmless farmers and servants moving through their lines. When Ulysses S. Grant rode up to Elizabeth Van Lew's house in April 1865, his public show of gratitude ended her 4-year cover story in an instant. The reaction from her neighbors was permanent. Richmond society realized they had been deceived by one of their own for years. Former friends refused to speak to her, and the community severed all social and business ties. She had exhausted her family fortune funding the Union cause. Despite a temporary appointment as postmaster under Grant, she was eventually pushed out and spent her final years in severe financial distress. She died in 1900, largely forgotten by the public. Today, the monument marking her grave on Church Hill was paid for by Massachusetts, acknowledging a service her own city still viewed as treason. Van Lew successfully operated in the open for 4 years by leveraging the Confederate leadership's own deep prejudices against them. Their rigid certainty regarding social class, gender, and race provided a far more reliable shield than any degree of secrecy.